Welcome to LinesToGo installation videos. Today we will be removing and installing brake lines on a 2003 GMC Sierra using LinesToGo part number BLC-104-SS. While this particular installation is being performed on a 2003 Sierra, this set of lines will also fit the following year, make, and models as shown on your screen now. LinesToGo lines are made using original equipment end forms and fittings that are CNC bent for an easy and precise installation. We have also upgraded to stainless steel braided Teflon hoses for rust protection and to prevent surface fouling. These have an unlimited shelf life and anti-static PTFE liner. This set of LinesToGo lines are made using 304L stainless steel for rust resistance that exceeds OEM standards. Tech tip: disconnect the battery before working on a vehicle to reduce the risk of shorting out the battery on tools or lines. LinesToGo lines are made with a sectional design for easier installation. We also use color-coded unions on our sectioned lines. Just match the colors at the connections. Make sure to depressurize the fuel system before starting the installation. Tools required: 5/16 of an inch, 10mm, 14mm, and 19mm wrenches, 7mm, 13mm, 15mm, and 22mm sockets and ratchet, flat blade screwdriver, pliers and cutting pliers, drain pan, jack and jack stands. The level of difficulty for this installation is considered to be easy. To depressurize the fuel system, locate the fuel pump fuse using your owner's manual and remove it. Start the vehicle and wait for the engine to stall. Make sure to replace the fuse once completed. Start by disconnecting the negative battery terminal using a 5/16 of an inch wrench. Use a flat blade screwdriver to remove the plastic clip that secures the primary and secondary brake lines together. Use a 14mm wrench to remove both threaded fittings from the master cylinder. Remove the electrical connector from the proportioning valve. Remove both upper threaded fittings from the proportioning valve using a 14mm wrench. Note, you can use a 19mm wrench to hold the proportioning valve. Remove the top section of the primary and secondary lines from the vehicle. Raise and support the vehicle and remove all four wheels using a 22mm socket. Next, we will need to remove both front inner fenders. Use a flat blade screwdriver to remove the plastic push clips that secure both front inner fenders and remove the fenders from the vehicle. Use a 14mm wrench to remove the two lower threaded fittings from the proportioning valve. Use a 14mm wrench to remove the threaded fittings connected to the left front and right front flex hoses located inside of the wheel wells. Use a 15mm socket to remove the bolts that secure the front plastic lower cover and remove it from the vehicle. Remove the right front line from the plastic clips across the front cross member and use a pair of cutting pliers to cut the line at the front of the driver's side frame rail. Remove the passenger side section of the right front brake line from the vehicle. Next, remove the lines from the plastic clips inside of the left front wheel well and cut the brake lines using a pair of cutting pliers close to the firewall. Remove all of the brake lines located in front of the firewall from the vehicle. Next, underneath the vehicle, remove all of the threaded fittings from the ABS module using a 14mm wrench. Remove the 4 remaining forward brake lines from the vehicle. Remove the top and bottom quick connect hose connections from the charcoal canister located in front of the fuel tank. Remove the quick connect fitting that attaches to the vent line. Use a 13mm socket to remove the bolt that secures the charcoal canister into position. Slide the canister towards the center of the vehicle to remove it. Disconnect the pressure and return line quick connections at the front of the fuel tank by depressing the 2 tabs to remove them. Next, use a 7mm socket to remove the 3 screws that secure the fuel filler neck into position. Support the fuel tank and use a 15mm socket to remove the bolts that secure the fuel tank straps. Start to lower the fuel tank, making sure to feed the filler neck over the frame. Once the tank is lowered enough, disconnect the 2 electrical connectors on the sending unit. Continue to lower the tank and remove it from underneath the vehicle. Above the rear axle, use a 14mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the top of the rear flex hose. Remove the rear feed line from the plastic clips along the frame. Use a pair of cutting pliers to cut the rear feed line at the center and remove both sections from the vehicle. To begin the installation of your new LinesToGo stainless steel brake lines, start by installing the rear section of the rear feed line labeled 05B into position. Secure the line into the plastic clips along the frame. Start the rear threaded fitting into the top of the rear flex hose union. Next, install the front section of the rear LinesToGo feed line labeled 05A into position. Start the front threaded fitting into the top outboard port in the ABS module. Connect the 2 lines at the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection and tighten the union using 2 14mm wrenches. Tighten the fittings in the ABS module and rear flex hose using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the rear section of the right front LinesToGo brake line labeled 04A into position. Start the rear threaded fitting into the top central port in the ABS module. Next, install the forward section of the right front LinesToGo brake line labeled 04B into position. Secure the lines into the plastic clips along the frame. Start the threaded fitting into the top of the right front flex hose. Connect the 2 sections of line at the threaded union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Tighten the union using 2 14mm wrenches. Tighten the fittings in the right front flex hose and the ABS module using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the left front LinesToGo brake line labeled 03 into position. Start the rear threaded fitting into the top inboard port in the ABS module. Start the front threaded fitting into the top of the left front flex hose. Tighten the fittings in the flex hose and ABS module using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the rear section of the secondary LinesToGo brake line labeled 02 into position. Start the rear threaded fitting into the bottom outboard port in the ABS module. Start the front threaded fitting into the front lower port in the proportioning valve. Tighten both threaded fittings using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the rear section of the primary LinesToGo brake line labeled 01 into position. Start the rear threaded fitting into the bottom inboard port in the ABS module. Start the front threaded fitting into the bottom rear port in the proportioning valve. Tighten both threaded fittings using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the front section of the primary line labeled 01A into position and start the threaded fitting into the rear port in the master cylinder and the top rear port in the proportioning valve. Tighten both fittings using a 14mm wrench. Next, install the front section of the secondary line labeled 02A into position and start the threaded fittings into the front port in the master cylinder and the top front port in the proportioning valve. Tighten both threaded fittings using a 14mm wrench. Replace the electrical connector in the proportioning valve. Bleed all four wheels using a 10mm wrench, making sure to keep the master cylinder reservoir topped up with fluid. Next, replace the fuel tank underneath the vehicle and begin to raise it into place, making sure to feed the filler neck over the frame. Once the tank is high enough, replace the electrical connectors at the sending unit. Continue to raise the fuel tank. Replace the tank straps and secure them using a 15mm socket. Replace the 3 screws at the top of the filler neck using a 7mm socket. Connect the supply and return line quick connections at the front of the fuel tank. Replace the charcoal canister back into position and secure it using a 13mm socket. Reconnect the quick connect fittings at the charcoal canister. Replace the quick connect fitting at the rear vapor line. Replace the plastic lower cover and secure it using a 15mm socket. Replace both front inner fenders back into position and secure them using the plastic push clips. Replace all 4 wheels and torque to your manufacturer's recommended specification using a 22mm socket. Reconnect the negative battery terminal using a 5/16" wrench. This concludes the installation of stainless steel brake lines on a 2003 GMC Sierra using LinesToGo part number BLC-104-SS. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or would like to purchase the lines you saw today, please call us at 1-855-781-5992. Email us at info@linestogo.com or check out our website link below. And don't forget to take advantage of our free 2-day shipping. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you on our next video.